Peace, and welcome to Rerootd Radio. This is the community for creatives who are committed to wellness and our ancestral roots. We are just about in fourth episode of the Rerootd Renaissance, and we are continuing our series, just getting more deeper into this conversation of what it means to be a creative, what it means to be someone that is aligned with our ancestors, with our roots, and just what it means to be an artist in these times and everything that's happening. I'm really excited for today because I have a special guest and a good friend of mine, a mentor, a brother. Welcome. Again, we are 4 episodes in, and this season is all about us really taking a moment to reflect on what it means to be an artist, what it means to be a creative, and really what it means to just be an intentional human that is choosing to create. So, without further ado, today we have a special guest who will share his wisdom, and really someone that I've been blessed to know for the past 3 years now, which is wild. And they are the founder of Smiling Boys Project, which is a project that's dedicated, based in happiness research on the mental health and breaking the stereotypes of young Black boys. And now is also Smiling Girls program, so it's also young Black girls. And I'm grateful to call him a mentor, a dear friend, and my brother. But I will let him introduce himself and all the hats that he wears. Please welcome Rufai.
Thank you so much for the introduction. I'm really, really honored to be here. So as introduced, my name is Adekunle Rufai. So I am a British Nigerian, and I currently reside in Los Angeles for most of my time. And other parts of the world are also places that I slowly call home as well. So I'm an artist. That's the primary hat that I wear, I think, and that has multiple tentacles. So I use visual medium, poetry, to interrogate particular themes, which I guess Kaylyn alluded to. And my main themes of interest in the last 10 years have been mental health and the intersection between mental health, gender, and race. So specifically, that's landed me in the kind of demographic space of working with Black boys to improve the mental health of young Black boys, but also use visual arts as a conduit to challenge the way that the world experience Black boys and how these images directly relate to the impact of Black boys' mental health, Black boys' self-esteem, Black boys' sense of identity. And then ultimately that led me to designing and creating a program called the Smiling Boys Project, which is to improve the outcomes for young Black boys in education, but also in the wider context of our society. So that's me. And that's one of the multiple hats that I wear.
Yes, many hats, many colorful hats. Yes, I'm grateful, Kay. I thank you for that. Taking us like to the origin and where Smiling Boys started. Yeah, I'd love to hear if you want to share a little more, um, where your creative journey started. Like I know you said artist is, what you do in all your forms. Where did that start for you?
Yeah, so I'm a Nigerian. If you didn't catch that with my name, I'm a Nigerian. Adekunle is my Yoruba name, so my tribe is Yoruba. So I say that to say, I was born into a uh, traditional, somewhat traditional African household of 2 immigrant parents that migrated to England for better socioeconomic and educational opportunities, which meant that for them, in their eyes, a child that would be their offspring in this new European territory, what represented success and kind of mitigation against the challenges they faced was that this child also had to academically thrive, and therefore you needed to seek out career paths that are more financially stable and socioeconomically lucrative. So my sister is a lawyer. My older sister's a lawyer. My mother had dreams of me being a doctor. So with that being a kind of template and foundation of my upbringing, um, and I didn't grow up around my father, so that's another kind of significant part of this puzzle. So growing up as a young black boy in the context of a environment where I was devoid of a black male figure, there was a lot of things that were bubbling inside of me in terms of questions about my identity, what it is that I needed to understand about myself, but not having the room and the safe space to really navigate that. So art became my conduit to really explore and expand in this kind of internal dialogue that I was having. So for me, very early on, music became, I guess, the father that I didn't have. So I listened to people like, Tupac very early on, listening to his, articulation poetically about the journey of being a black man in similar circumstances of not having a father figure and having a mother who was, wearing multiple pants in the household and multiple hats, as it were, and what this did for his kind of yearning for male validation. And then, people like Andre 3000 and Nas, and those people kind of formed early sort of pillars, as well as Lauryn Hill, around my understanding of emotions and what these things were. So naturally, my way of really engaging with these aspects of myself through art was to write, because those things I consumed really allowed me to understand that you can use words to articulate the things that you cannot really express. So I used to just jot down stuff in my notebook quietly and just like write. And before I know it, I was like, man, these are poetic rhymes. They would, some of them will rhyme, some of them will have multiple layers of like metaphors and stuff. And I was like, oh, okay, cool. Like this feels really powerful. So that was like my early introduction to art, just really learning to express myself and the things I couldn't really articulate in terms of like my emotions and my needs. You know, listening to people like I said, all those artists, they showed me how to articulate my emotions through a creative means. So that felt really like something that aligned with me, because I was a quiet kid. I was quite shy-ish when I was younger. So, I couldn't really vocalize those things. So I just really wrote them down. So that was like my initial introduction to like art, just learning to use words, poetry as a way to express myself. And then over time that evolved into some of the other forms now.
Yeah, beautiful to hear where the that it started with words. And I didn't really know that about you, um, because you're such a visual
Mm-hmm.
person now, and like with the fashion, with the video, and photography. So it definitely surprises me that yeah, that you started with something really tangible. And in connection to that, you kind of talked about it, like you being a quiet kid, you being someone that didn't really have, the father figure at home, but still had hip hop to help. Where did your wellness journey start? And if it started at the same time as your art, if it started different, where would you say was your origin for your wellness story?
Wow, yeah. My wellness journey started very late.
Mm,
It only started maybe, I'll say maybe 10 years, maybe 11, 12 years ago. I would say at the earliest it would be about 12 years ago. Um, because again, to the point that I highlighted on before, a child of immigrants, you know, and this idea of resilience, meaning that you just deal with everything that's thrown your way and just keep it moving. So that's what I got raised in, that context of immigrant parents that are super hardworking and really did
mm,
3, 4 jobs just to make sure that we never really went without eating. So for me, everything that I felt that I needed around my mental well-being and just my general well-being was so secondary to
mm,
the survival that a capitalist society breeds in you, which is about, the rat race, getting above others and making sure that you have food on the table, you got nice clothes, all those things. So all of that preceded and took priority over anything else that would have been what my well-being needs would have been. So it's not until like 12 years ago, like I said, doing
mm,
work with young people and really having to, that's the beautiful thing about working with young people, working with people, period. It creates a mirror, right? It provided an opportunity for me to see what it is that I needed to be doing for myself to be able to provide a space for young people to be able to think about doing those things for themselves. So that was like a dual healing journey for me, foraying into this work of using creative arts as a tool to improve the well-being of young people. First, I started to do work in prisons and secure facilities, recognizing how deeply unsafe that environment was psychologically, but also physically for the young people that I worked with, and recognizing that, okay, like even though they're in these shackles, I'm not much more freer than them in terms of just my mental shackles. And that was like this really powerful metaphor that dawned on me while I was working in that space. And I realized I needed to start to unshackle myself. So that journey began like 12 years ago, with just proximity to this work. And then ultimately, over time, that expanded into me doing a lot of individual self-learning by reading a lot of books and listening to, watching, and looking for really incredible, inspiring educators and thinkers in this field to really allow me to start this journey of deep diving into my own needs around well-being.
Yeah, it definitely sounds like hearing how it came, well, in your words, that it came so late, but for you, that having art that was something, and specifically poetry or written word, that found you early. um I can hear how, you were still developing these tools even though you didn't have the language. um and yeah, so that way when you got to this point where you were working with youth or working with incarcerated youth, that kind of like had that switch moment of like, oh shoot, like there's actually something else that I maybe haven't been paying attention to. um yeah, this is really powerful to hear. um I love this piece you said about the mirror and how it's a you seeing yourself in a different light. And that you may be physically free, but like mentally there may have been things that you've been limiting yourself. um yeah, could you share a little more about the like, was there a moment when the two came together for you? Or because up to that point when you were writing, or you're doing more poetry and doing more seeing yourself as an artist, um was there a moment when you connected your art with your well-being, or was that always connected to you?
Right. So I don't know if you notice about me in a real and the kind of detail that I would share a little bit, but
Yeah.
so that journey of poetry evolved into making rap music. And I started to
Hold on, buckle your seatbelts, folks. I did not know this.
yeah, so I used to, make music. I used to tour, I used to perform. I released, you know, a couple of projects, at least 5 different projects. And I used to so for me, that became the real conduit because the poetry was a thing I
Mm,
did for myself.
yeah.
And then I realized that I needed to share this out with the world in the way that Tupac, Lauren, Common, Nas did, that spoke to a young black boy like me in like a foreign place, very different to their environment, but I still connected, related to it, and felt this interconnectedness. So I felt like that was also incumbent on me to do the same thing and to express myself in that way. So I started making music. And that was really something that I thought was going to be like my life career. I really enjoyed it. I was really good at rapping, and I used to tour, perform. And it got to a point where I got medium level success. This is way before, Instagram and, just the early days of MySpace. That's giving my age away right now. I'm
Yeah.
42 years old, you know. So, it wasn't a place where you put something out there and then you get a couple views and everybody's like, yo, he's going to be hot, whatever. It's like there was so much more. There was so much more gatekeepers and stuff like that. So it got to a point where I'd done enough to get my name out. And then we were in position where we were looking at somebody trying to offer us a deal. And I guess the deal on the table was dependent upon myself being able to make sure that the content and the art that I created through my music was only reflecting a particular type of audience
Mm,
that was going to listen to me because they saw me as
mm,
somebody who was very flamboyant, colorful, expressive. They was like, okay, cool. You got to be the person that talks about the things that girls like and talks about all these things. And I'm like, but I got other things to talk about because even though I might express like this, but actually the kind of things that bring me to music is so much more about cognitive thinking. It's about all these things that actually are deeper inside. So I realized that I couldn't be the version of myself I wanted to be in music at that time, where the only thing that was going to propel me forward was to choose a particular lane where I wasn't talking about the things that mattered to me. And at that point, I realized that what was so important to me around my integrity and my kind of sense of purpose was that
Mm,
my music was connected to how I really wanted to show the world about what was inside and how I felt and how that was a healing for me. And if I chose to keep making music and not focusing on those things, then I was doing a disservice to myself and my well-being. So I took a step away from music at that point. And that was like the turning point where the connection between well-being and art happened for me because I was willing to, well, I made a choice to walk away from something that seemingly at the time felt like the gateway out of the situations I was in socioeconomically, where I felt like, okay, maybe I'd have got a deal, maybe that would have made me famous or whatever, because I got to a point where, you know, I've been, working with artists that were quite established and well known, and I was supporting people on tour at the time, Ed Sheeran and people like that. So I
yeah.
felt like
Wow.
for me to make that choice, which was not a question for me, but it
Hmm.
showed me how important that I valued those things. And then at the same time, because of the people that I was raised on in terms of musically, I felt like my role was to also be a social commentator
Yeah.
of what I saw around me. So at that time, in that environment in London, being around lots of, you know, um, underserved youth, which means there was a lot of crime, a lot of violence, a lot of things like that. I realized that I needed to not just be a social commentator. I needed to think about how could I create something that also expose the world to the layers of what's beneath what people see when they think about violence and they think about gang killings and things like that. Like what's beneath all of that that nobody's talking about, because that's what I was inspired to really connect to in myself, but also talk about through the music that I was making at the time. So I thought, okay, cool. Now that I'm not going to use music as the medium, how am I going to also use creative arts as another way to really tell these stories and provide an opportunity for, the society to wake up and create new tools to support young Black boys? So that was kind of the beginning of that journey for me.
Wow. I can't believe man holding back this whole time. I'm gonna have to listen to them albums for sure to
Yeah.
send them. But yeah, just to hear the journey of you constantly um choosing your integrity, like you said, and really being in this place of that crossroads moment of you being like, okay, I could go to this, you know, get this contract, get the money, and just write about what they want me to write about. Um, and to think that all the youth, the more than 1,000 or thousands of youth that you've already worked with today, that wouldn't have been impacted in the same way if that choice was made.
Mm,
Um, so yeah, I think that's a beautiful moment just to hear like you not willing to compromise your well-being, your peace of mind, your spirit for, like you said, this capitalist system or just whatever the people are trying to get you to sign that contract, their intentions as opposed to your integrity. Um, yeah, I I want to pivot a little bit, um, still in connection, but where where are your well, you already talked about it, but yeah, where are your ancestors from, and how do you feel that that connects to your choice as an artist or your creativity?
hmm. So, like I said, I'm Nigerian, so my ancestors are Yoruba people, from Nigeria, and obviously prior to the actual colonial naming of this country, it's in the western region of Africa, at least. Yoruba people are spread across that region. So I think my first connection to what my ancestors' spirit artistically was. was through Fela and Kuti, who's, one of the most revolutionary um African artists, but just artists, period. But what he represented was something that I'd never experienced before, somebody who was a living antithesis to the government state of order, which was trying to get people to follow in line. And ultimately, at that time when there was like a lot of colonial invasion throughout Africa, he was somebody that really was trying to reconnect us to our own understanding of our indigenous ways, our ways of being, our understanding that colonial ideas are not beneficial to our own liberation and emancipation. So that was my first introduction to like what my ancestors kind of power could be. At the time, obviously, when I was growing up, I wasn't necessarily encouraged to listen to him because again, like he was somebody that, you know, in the environment that I was growing up in at the time, he was seen as somebody who was rebellious, and he was not making good music. His music was about trying to get people to smoke weed and, do all these illegal things, which is how he was branded, I guess, in a popular media, even in Nigeria at the time. But I think, retrospectively, when I was a little older, I was able to really understand that actually what he was doing was so revolutionary. His mother, he came from a long line of his mother being a civil rights activist, and his mother, was killed in the course of her beliefs and her fight for equality for women in Nigeria at the time, working class women. So, he came from a long line of that, and he ultimately furthered along that narrative. So for me, that was like my first introduction of just seeing somebody from my kind of country, but also my tribe, being somebody who had artistic conviction to use art as a tool for liberation for his people. And I think so much further in my kind of adult development, I've learned about so many other people, like Wallace Showing, who's like, uh, uh, I think is what's this prize? It's the Nobel Laureate
Bell.
Prize.
Oh, okay.
Yes, yes, yeah. So he's the only, I think the only African that's got that prize, if I'm 100% right. He's an incredible uh writer, poet, and just like orator. So that's somebody I learned about much later, about the
Yeah.
incredible work and the way he has always spoken about, our experiences as Africans, and then obviously writers like Chinua Achebe and people like that. Things fall apart, so I learned about all these people much later. But yeah, so the legacy and a long line of powerful, ancestors of mine that have been really staking a claim for our humanities, for our
Mm,
expansive ways of being, has always
mm.
been there. But I think I came to it again later than perhaps I wished I was able to come to it. But I think everything happens at the right time for the right things.
That is very surprising to me that Fela was ever depicted as some like, you know, negative influence or bad thing. But I guess in media that makes sense in terms of who he was. But um, yeah, that shocks me. It sounds like they was treating him in my understanding like how hip hop was treated here. When it
Right,
first came out, it's like they was treating
right,
him like, bad for the kids.
right, hundred
Um,
percent.
yeah, or something like that had a deep impact on you. And yeah, just the way that even from the way that you carry yourself and this like this spirit that you have towards the education system and through even the rap industry that you're about to enter, like this saying no and creating something new.
Mm.
So I definitely see that connection. Um, yeah, I love this. So I want to take a step, and we'll talk more about ancestors later, but if you tell us a little more about zooming into K and how you, now that you've been kind of on your wellness journey for the past decade and now something that's more part of your practice, what are the like non-negotiable K's routine or his elements that you use to keep yourself grounded, keep yourself sustain so that you can keep creating.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting to use the word grounded because the first thing that came to me is travel. So it's definitely the opposite of
Mm,
grounded.
yeah.
But for me, I think that's a non-negotiable for me. It's a spiritual grounding and a soulful
Mm,
grounding, albeit a non-physical grounding, because I'm ultimately talking about being in the air a lot of times. But for me, I think it's one of the things that definitely shifted and altered my state of being the most is this ability to step out of my own environment, because there is a deceptive safety that comes with the idea that where you're from is all you need to know about and master that, and that's home and that's safe. Everything else is uncomfortable. But what that does is it breeds this homogenous thinking. It breeds this closed-mindedness. It breeds this inability to see that the ceiling is so much more higher than you perceive based on what's around you. So traveling really allowed me to shatter all those facades and help me break through all those veils to see that actually there isn't much difference between me and another, brother that's in Uganda. Or really, I mean, there's so much nuance in our experiences, which are different, but the reality of the core of our understanding, the things that drive us, the things that allow us to wake up in the morning aspirationally, there are not much difference in that. And actually, through a lot of misled stories about our experiences, it forced me to think about these people are so different from me. And ultimately, we were one people, similarly with like traveling to other continents and really
mm,
recognizing all these indigenous practices that all these groups of people had prior to like, colonial ideas really allowed me to just be so much more affirmed in who I was, and recognizing that the humanity in us is the strongest bond that holds us together. No matter if language fails us, if religion fails us, our humanities are so strongly interwoven to each other. So the more I travel, the more I realize this to be true. And I
mm,
realized that everything I was told is the opposite of that for
right.
conscious reasons. Because if we were able to recognize how collectively bonded we were, ultimately the people in power would not have the kind of stronghold that they wanted to have on us. So the more I traveled, the more I loosened the stronghold and recognized that actually we are such a connected peoples. And the more we connected back to that, we would be able to create a society that is dependent upon community, support, community resolutions, all of these things. So for me, travel is like one of the biggest things that helps me feel grounded and helps expand
Mm,
my mind and my soul. Also, nature is something that I don't prioritize as much as I would love to,
hmm.
which has been a goal and a challenge for myself to be even more intentional about that. But I recognize that when I am slowing down and I'm in nature and, connect in a true essence of the word. So shoes off and, you know,
Yeah.
either feet in the sand or in the grass. Like I feel this, obviously physiologically, there's a
Hmm.
burst of, dopamine and oxytocin that comes to my body, but even just like how I feel, you know, in my soul, and just hearing the sounds of the birds and the trees and all of that. I was in Brazil recently, and that was something that, I was able to just really surround myself with, and just thinking, wow, this is so rich for my soul. So there's that. And there's just the consciousness to slow down. What that could look like could just be dipping in a pool, 2 times, 3 times a week, taking a walk, in a park somewhere, choosing to not scroll on social media is something that I've really,
Yeah.
um,
That's a big
uh,
one.
prioritized in the last 4 years in my life, to just make sure I have this kind of, commitment to not scroll on any social media platforms, to just go in there and understand what it serves me
Mm,
in terms of connecting to some people. And if I really want to know much more about them, then I go onto their page, as opposed to just letting the algorithm feed me with things that might alter my state of mind or my mental well-being, just based on the things that might show up on my feed. So those are things that I've really been very intentional about. And also,
mm,
like, I guess, being more open to really engaging in things like yoga, which is not things I do as kind of uh committedly, but it's
Yeah.
things that I've really in the last 2 years, 3 years, I think I've been really more curious about and been really trying to create space for those things in my life as well.
Say, oof, I love it. It's like a gumbo. Got it all the ingredients you need. Um, yeah, I love cause even just the way that your wellness is set up and how you talk about it is colorful in of itself.
Mm,
Um, yeah, for you, I definitely hear like how you start off with travel and being connected to the world and connected to other people, connected to the earth, getting your feet in the earth, while also knowing how to set boundaries with the world, because you're basically like, social media and all these things. Like I make sure I don't take in too much. Um, so yeah, I hear the balance of embracing, soaking it in, while also knowing where your boundaries are.
hmm
Um, and I feel like that's really key. And for you, being a creative and being an artist in every essence of the word, how do you feel that your creativity fuels your wellness?
hmm. I feel that once I realized what my purpose was on this planet, everything started to make sense. But at the same time, it felt like a burden because I couldn't do anything else that wasn't aligned to my purpose anymore. Right. So art was this thing that allowed me to get a feeling that is not replicable in any other form for me. So when I create, be it photography or like when I write a new poem or when I make a new piece of clothing, which is a new, creative outlet that I've, evolved in the last 3, 4, 5 years, you know, um, the sense of joy and this kind of connection to the spiritual element of art, which I see as magic. Because, art is this ability to take something that's so esoteric and non-tangible and manifest it through a tangible way for you to experience, but also in some cases for others to experience. And there's nothing more magical than that because it's like this, it was a thought a second ago, and then you did something, and that thought became a piece of pants, or it became a picture, like these images in the back. They were just people just walking around, and then in a moment, the capture of the images allowed this moment to be frozen in time, and for us to look at that and try to deduce the emotions behind a person and all the things that is encompassed in that image. And that's ultimately, for me, there's nothing more magical than that.
Mm,
And the feeling I get when I create magic, you know is so soothing because it allows me to understand that my purpose is being realized every moment, and there's nothing that compares to that for me. So that impacts my well-being in such a rich way because it allows me to recognize that I'm alive. It allows me to recognize that I'm doing something that is magical that I cannot conceive in my mind. Because
mm,
as much as, our ego wants to let us know that, oh man, I'm so great. I made these clothes. I took these photos. But really and truly, what was happening was I was channeling something that was bigger than me, you know, because essentially with every piece of, for example, with clothing that I make, every sketch that I make looks so different to the piece of clothing that comes out at the end, which shows that, I really don't know what I'm doing, because I think I have an idea, but once I get in there, something else that's outside of me takes over me. And I'm like, okay, cool. Let me go this direction. Let me take it this way. Let me do that, and much like, the work that we do in the sessions, yes, we have workshop structures that we've set up,
right.
but when we step into the room, what the boys bring into the room dictate how we engage and how that session looks like, and that is the beauty of art for me, is this ability to surrender to what is bigger than you and then
Yeah.
let that thing tell you what it needs to be. And that's the magic that really fuels my purpose and my soul. And that gives me this feeling that, you know, it's like the dopamine heat hits that, a lot of us seek for in life in many ways. And for me, I'm so grateful that art is one of the ways that continually gets, nourished for me.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah, I see when I hear you speak, I see the like the overflow. Um, this like battery that almost your creativity fuels and is charging you up. And yeah, it just allows you to continue to feel engaged with your purpose. Um, because yes, I've definitely have experienced just that element of, feeling that sometimes it's very visceral, like the actual tingling sensation. Like I could feel it in my hands sometimes when I'm rapping, um, or just like the elation of, getting in the flow state and letting go of the world. Um, so yeah, just hearing that magic and that medicine for you. Um, yeah, I feel like those two words when it comes to art kind of hand in hand, and this mysticism that you're bringing through.
Mm,
Um, Now you kind of answered it, but and if you feel like it's going to be the same, we could just pass this question. But the other way around, how does your how does your wellness fuel your creativity?
mm. Yeah, that's a beautiful question. I feel like when I'm in, so I create less when I'm in London, which I've had to really try to interrogate that, to be like, okay, what is it about when I'm in London? I make less clothes. I don't really go out and photograph nothing, and I don't feel as creative energetically. And that's ultimately in recent times has dawned on me is the fact that when I'm in London, I tap back into capitalism so much more in terms of I'm always on the go. I'm back and forth. I'm jumping on a tube. I'm going from A to B. I'm in like 5 schools in one day. The weather is really dark and gray and wet. So these things impact my well-being in a way that is so deeply unrecognizable first, because I just don't even know that, because I'm the same person. I'm just busier, but actually what it is my well-being and my mood, is so much more impacted negatively being in that space, that it impacts on my ability to channel whatever it is that comes through when I create. But when I'm in LA or when I'm in Brazil, I feel much more creative, because my energy feels so much more lighter. I have much more space
Yeah.
in a literal sense of just being more closer to nature, and the place is so much more expansive here in Los Angeles or whatnot. But
Mm,
also like space in my diary and my calendar, to really feel like, okay, cool. Like, what do I want to do today? Where does the energy want to take me today? Whereas in London, it just feels so bam, 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 bam for so many reasons, right? So yeah, so my well-being definitely gets impacted by the environment, by the pace of my life, which then impacts directly the art that I create, or the desire to create art, or the inspiration to create art. But what then replaces that sometimes is I expose myself to a lot more art. So I go to more
right.
museums, because
Right.
London is a city that has a lot of museums and artistic things. So I might go and see a play. I might go and see, a photography exhibition or whatever. So I just go and see more art, but
Yeah.
the inspiration to create art is less.
And you're still engaged with it in some way.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of,
Mm-hmm.
yeah. That environment piece is huge. I actually feel like it's not like you said, because it's something that's so subtle. It's almost like a
Mm-hmm.
fish doesn't know when it's wet kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, but once you become aware of it, that even then, I like how you're bringing through this piece, and you can still do something about it. Like, okay, so environment might not be the best for, like, conducive for you, but are you filling yourself up with inspiration and, working within what we have? Um, yeah, because that's a big one. I can imagine that in Brazil, you're creating even more than when you're in LA.
The feeling is there. The feeling to create is so much more alive in Brazil because there's so much stimuli. It's a new
Yeah,
language. There's so much that's happening. The way that people live is different. The way people express is so rich and expansive. That I'm just like, oh man, like my energy feels so alive here. My soul feels so alive. I want to create more
yeah,
stuff here. I want to do this. I
yeah,
want to do that. So the inspiration is there. Um, and obviously doing the work there in those communities in the favelas have also been super inspiring. But also, I feel more inspired to create
yeah.
in Brazil for sure. But also to soak in a lot of the inspiration that's there.
Mm-hmm. Shay. Well, we are mindful of the time coming to the last 2 minutes, which I can't believe it's already been 45
Damn,
minutes
that's that's crazy.
diving in.
Hmm.
Loving it though. Thank you for, really just sharing your heart and bringing your perspective. I feel like this is really going to be valuable to the people that are listening and bringing through. Um, so in the last few questions, in the spirit, just to bring it, current to the times, and you did mention some things about, just the society we live in, even just your origin story about how you had to make that pivotal decision of what kind of artist you were going to be, and how to answer the calling of your calling. Um, but given like what's happening now, whether it's the technology and everything that's advancing with AI, what's happening politically, and just all the things that are happening, at least from my American perspective and even just the international perspective of the world. Um, what do you feel like artists are being called to remember right now? And what do you feel is for the next generation of artists, like what is important for them to hold true?
Yeah, this is a really difficult one for me in terms of just like feeling like it's not fair to prescribe to people what their art should be addressing or what their art should represent. But at the same time, because art is art, right? People have the right to express art however and whatever they feel. But for me, I felt like I didn't have the luxury to do that, right? And as many Black artists, we don't have a lot of the times the luxury to choose to just make art about nothing, right? Because I'm just an artist. I just happen to be Black. You don't expect my stuff to be political. I don't need to talk about whatever, right? But for the most part, we cannot separate ourselves from that because even if we choose to, other people are going to ask you, so what's the double meaning behind this picture that you painted? What is it saying about whatever, because everybody projects that on us because they understand that we are people that have rich stories. We've had, in many cases, lots of adversity. So they expect that our art responds to, reflects on, or makes social commentary about these things. So for me, I felt like, well, the world expects me to talk about anything that is related to my experiences, but also I cannot not talk about it, because these are things that I needed from previous artists to allow me to have this roadmap to get through to where I'm going,
Right.
so it will be unkind, irresponsible, and un elder statesmen like to not do the same thing for all the other generations that will be coming after, in a way to give them a roadmap to think, oh, this person that came before me tried to address these things and his
Mm-hmm.
work spoke to these things. And therefore, it allows me to feel like I have the license to also speak to these things and maybe many more things, right? So for me, I feel like as an artist, a Black artist, um, what my response to that question would be is, we are the strongest people on this planet. And the reason why is because we have a legacy and a long, long, long history of people that have come before us that have addressed so many of the things that we're benefiting from through their art. And that's the
Mm,
reason why we were able to do that. So anybody could say about, I want to make hip hop just about, selling whatever, drugs or cars or whatever, but you couldn't have made hip hop if the people in the Bronx didn't speak about the kind of things that was affecting them, which allowed them to all come together in the park and then
that's
create
right.
beats and turntables and scratch and the KRS-Ones and Africa Bombata and all these people were able to do that. So
Mm-hmm.
similarly with every other thing, that we have kind of created into this multi-billion industry, the root of those things came from people responding to the oppressions that came from our people. So with that being said, I don't think everybody's music or everybody's art should be about oppression.
Right,
I
right.
think that we need to connect to the soul behind what the art is. And when the art feels soulless, that's where I feel like I cannot connect with it, right?
Mm,
And that's the question. That's my response to the question. To always connect to our soul when we create art. And whatever your soul feels should be responded to through your art. And therefore we should be able to connect with what that is. And if we cannot
yes.
connect with it, then you're not connecting with your own soul. And therefore you're
Mm.
doing a disservice to yourself first and ultimately to everybody else that's consuming your art.
Woo! Okay, you preached today. Yes, yeah, let that breathe. Um, yeah, if you are not creating from your soul, you are doing a disservice to yourself and those who are receiving your art. That's powerful, Kay. It's powerful. Um, yeah, I definitely, because even what you brought through about Fela Kuti, like if like the way that he's impacted you and Tupac, these people that have been explicit about what they were doing for the next generation, and yeah, just really bringing through um yeah this message for us to not, again, not telling no one what to do or what to create. You have a liberty, but it's like if we're ignoring this knowledge of ourself, knowledge of our ancestry, knowledge of where we come from, it's really not doing nobody no good. It's
Mhm,
starting with ourselves.
mhm.
um so yeah, I love that powerful response. um and again, same thing we tell Smiling Boys, ain't no right or wrong answer here. So I'm grateful to hear just your perspective. That's yeah, very expansive and very aligned with, I've been nerding out about um the definition and what art means, and a lot of what you're saying is connected to you said one of the author's name, I think it's Chebe.
Chinua Achebe.
Chebe, yeah. So I came across, I never really heard of him, but he was one
Mm,
of the first people that came up when I looked up, what does art mean from a Yoruba perspective.
mm,
Um, and yeah, just a lot of this essence of like bringing through the spirit and this getting past just art being this beautiful thing. It's really an emanation of what's already inside of you.
mhm,
So just love how that's just, that's naturally coming through you, and you got the ancestors speaking through you without you even, needed to quote it because you are it. So it's powerful. Um, yeah, I would say as we come to a close, just for our last question, for you, I want these conversations, as much as I want it to be, inspiring and open people up to different perspectives. I also want to leave listeners with something tangible that they could walk away with. So there is something for you that you wanted to share with listeners. Maybe it's somebody that's going through writer's block. Maybe it's somebody that's having trouble connecting with their soul and creating from that place. What is like a tool that has helped you, or whether you shared it already, you want to share a little more, or just something that you can, yeah, just really charge someone to encourage someone to try out for their wellness practice or creative practice.
hmm. Well, that's a big question. I'll say in two parts. There's the creative part, like creation part, like creating art piece, and then there's the well-being piece, right? I mean, the ambition is that the both of them are connected, but I see them kind of separately in terms of how I answer this question. Because obviously, because of capitalism, a lot of times our creativity is influenced by the output. Like we want to be able to create this so that we can get this, so we can get picked up by this person, so that this person could buy my art or whatever. And I think when we have writer's blocks sometimes, or we have creative blocks, it's often connected to our wedded relationship to the outcome. So
Yeah.
one of the biggest things for me when I had or experienced this kinds of block is to divorce myself from the outcome, right? To think that the purest version of the things that I created is not because I wanted it to, I wanted to create it for this thing. You know, I wanted it to look like this. Or I wanted it to be for this version of something. Because oftentimes when I created under that type of pressure or duress, the outputs might be fine, but they're not the best work that I think I've created. So for me, it's to just always go back to what's the core of the motivation to create. And if you can divorce yourself from the outcome and just think about the feeling that inspired you to want to create, whatever that was, whatever that feeling was, just like playfulness, or the feeling of just like, rhyming, or just this feeling of just like womanhood, or whatever it is, that feeling, tap back into that. And then whatever you create will be the purest form of that
Mm,
creation.
mm,
So that's the first piece around the creative part, because that's what I do when I feel those types of blocks. And then the second piece around the well-being is, for me, just thinking about, if you had autonomy over your own life and you could design every aspect of your day, what would be the things that you would put on that list? And when you do that, then you could then go back to then thinking, okay, now a lot of these things are an imagination of like a life which is utopic. But then actually, out of these things that I put down in this utopic life, how many of these things can I actually incorporate into my everyday life? And therefore, you start to figure out, like, actually, it's not all so fictional. Like, it's possible, if you're intentional, to think, okay, cool, this thing, I can bring it here. Maybe this thing I could do once a month instead of like every day. Then that way you create a well-being plan that is driven based on your imagination of the freest version of yourself, and actually then finding ways to be quite intentional about incorporating that into your actual life. So those are things that I tend to do, to help me kind of break out of this idea that, oh my God, my life is so busy anyway, so I can't do these things. But it's actually, you realize, if it just takes intentionality and just creating
mm-hmm.
this exercise for myself to allow me to think of how I can incorporate these things in little bits a month.
Mm. I say, thank you, Kay. Yeah, dropping gems. So I hope, yeah, somebody is really receiving, and I hope that this can be valuable to you if you're listening. Um, Kay, how can the people find you and support you?
Yeah, people can find me, Instagram, Universal Artist. So that's soul with a Soul. So I guess
Sure.
that feels fitting with the things that I've talked about. I'm an artist that's driven by my soul. So Universal Artist. But primarily, I want people to really tap into and connect with the Smiling Boys and the Smiling Girls work that we're doing. That is the biggest piece of work that I'm most passionate about in my life, to really bring as much resources and kind of proliferation of this work to the world in a way that allows these young boys and young girls to have greater access to the work that we're doing, and for the world to really get to shift their mindset around Black youth. That's my mission. So yeah, Smiling Boys, Smiling Girls. Again, you can find us on Instagram. That's Smiling Boys Project, and also Smiling Girls Project as well. So you can find us on Instagram. And yeah, we have a lot of events coming through in the next few months. We have some stuff planned for the summer as well, for our 3 years in Los Angeles. So we're gonna be putting some activations together to commemorate that. So yeah, stay tuned with what we're bringing forth into the world, and I look forward to connecting with more of you guys in that space.
Whew. I feel nourished by this conversation. I feel, yeah, really, um, I already felt energized before the call, but now just what we talked about and what you shared, Kay, really did, light something within the creative in me. So I know that
Mm,
there's other people feeling it. Thank you for your vulnerability. Thank you all for listening. I really hope you received something that you needed to hear today. Again, make sure that you follow, make sure you subscribe, all the YouTube influencer things that they say at the end. And yeah, just stay tuned with us. This is the community of Rerootd. We are starting to build. Grateful that Kay is, part of us now. And make sure you check out the show notes for anything that Kay mentioned. We'll have all his links in there, and any of the details you need. And lastly, join the email list so you can stay up to date with upcoming events that we have, especially for the spring, while we should all be resting for the winter. And that's it. Stay well, stay rooted, and we will see you next time. Peace.
peace.